What is your athletic background before you got this role as Shoot? I know you were a bodybuilder. How did this whole recruitment process go? Because I know you were actually not in high school anymore and you were jacked. I would hope I would never have to wrestle anyone that looked like Shoot if I was still in high school legitimately.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's very few high school wrestlers walking around looking like that. I spent years bodybuilding, five altogether, and I was incredibly dedicated. Those, 2 to 3 years I was at Eastern Washington. So what happened after high school is that I actually didn't wrestle my senior year. I did wrestle the first 3 years of high school, and then I switched and played tennis indoors during that winter semester that I would have been wrestling. And we played indoors over at Spokane, Washington. I lived in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And so I went and trained with the college team there, North Idaho college team. And I got a scholarship. So I played scholarship tennis there that first semester at North Idaho College. And I left because I was just not feeling like I was stimulated enough. I thought I was really going to jump to the next level with going to college and what I expected mentally in some of the classes. So I said, okay, I'm going to do something different completely. I left Coeur d'Alene, and I said to my dad, I'm going to become a bodybuilder, believe it or not. And he said, well, you need to make a living. So he said, this, look, they're putting people out as iron workers in the Tri-Cities at the nuclear Hanford, sites. So we can get you set up doing that. And that's what I did. And I went and worked as an iron worker for, 4 years. Um, it was a real eye opener. Iron workers, pipe fitters, carpenters, all these guys that are working in these laboring jobs. They're challenging. They're dangerous. As a matter of fact, I walked out onto the job site with two other apprentices. We were apprentices, so there's three of us total. And within that 4 years, one of the apprentices had fallen off the wall and died. And I saw several other people get smashed, get crushed. I almost was killed a couple of times. And so I realized it was fun while I was young, but I needed to do something different. And so that's why I left to become an athletic trainer at Eastern Washington, and where I really dove into my bodybuilding. So I had built myself up to 192 pounds for about a couple of years there training in the Tri-Cities. And then I jumped up to 215 in the next 2.5 years at Eastern. And that's when I got cast in the movie Vision Quest.
And could you tell us in detail how that casting process went? Because I understand they already had two wrestlers or two other people that were supposed to play Shoot casts, and then you randomly ended up as Shoot.
So you kind of cut out there, but you were asking about the other wrestlers, and what happened was that the role was cast twice before, and the neither one of them worked out for whatever reason. I don't know what the deal was, but they were 2.5 weeks out from starting the film, and one of the guys that was in the movie as an extra, Rick Thiefalt, he was an extra. And he was wrestling. He was going to wrestle for Eastern Washington, but he took that semester off because he was in the movie. But he ended up out there during one of the wrestling practices, sitting on the bench with me because I was the athletic trainer for the wrestling team that particular semester. And he started talking about that he was in a film and he was getting paid to wrestle. And he said it was pretty cool. And he says, you know what? Hey, they're still looking for somebody 6 foot tall, muscular build that can wrestle. He goes, yeah, that's you. You should definitely got to go check this out, Frank. You can make money just wrestling. And I was like, sounds like a good deal. I can, be a wrestler in the background and watch the way a movie gets made. And so he convinced me to go in for the audition. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And probably a good thing because, ignorance can be bliss, as they say. I walked into the casting director's office and she handed me sides. And what Rick never told me is that I actually had lines in the movie. And so she goes, hands them to me, and she says, "Okay, we're going to read through these, and as soon as you've had a chance, let's run the lines." So I ran the lines with her a couple of times, and then I made a mistake. I was nervous. This was something completely new for me, and I made a mistake, and I kind of laughed nervously. She looked at me, stopped me, looked me dead in the eyes, and just said, "Hey, listen, we're looking for intensity here. If you make a mistake, just continue on as if nothing happened. Got it?" I was like, "Okay." So I read the line with her again. That went well. She called up Harold Becker, who was the director, and they were operating out of one of the Spokane hotels there. And so we walked down the hallway and around to his office. I walked in, and he looked me up and down and said, "Okay, you know the lines," and took the sides out of my hands. And he says, let's run the lines." This before, so this is all new to me, but I just went along with it, and somehow I got through the lines, and I walked out of there, and I really can't tell you how I remembered everything. I just can't. I don't even know how I did the lines or what I said, but he was good, and he said, "Okay, we just need to see if you can wrestle." And so then the next day I had to go out to the wrestling practice that Cash Stone was running for all the actors and all the extras, just to prove that I could, be this character in the movie. Still had no idea what the role was exactly. And then I had to come back in another time because they liked that, I did prove that I could wrestle. Cash Stone I actually had wrestled a couple of years before with the Pasco wrestling college wrestling team, because I was on a break there from work because they had shut down the nuclear reactors for a period of time. And so this one friend of ours from Coeur d'Alene High School was a scholarship wrestler there at Pasco, and he asked me if I would come train with him because he didn't have anybody his weight to actually train with, and I was weighing about 192 at the time. So I did get some training then. So it had been a couple of years, but I had college level training wrestling, so that was good. And it seemed to like it was, I remembered it pretty easily for this particular event that we were doing. So then what we had left was I had to shave my mustache. I had a 1970s mustache back in the day. And I did that on another audition. And then they said, there's one more audition to do. And the producers and Nancy Klopper found a guy in LA. They're flying down, and you are the guy that's here. So you're both going to read for the producers and the director, and then they're going to decide who's going to be best for the role. So they flew this guy down from LA. I came to the audition. Casting director brought me over, and before we got to Harold Becker's office, he walked out into the hallway, and he looked at me and he said, "Okay, when you come in here, you stay in character the entire time, and I want you to be intense the entire time." And he went, and he slapped me, and it just stung, and I gritted my teeth, and I said, "Got it." And he goes, "That's what I'm looking for." So he goes back into the office, then I go back in, and then they bring me in, and so I'm reading the lines with this lady that's the casting director from Los Angeles. She's sitting in front. Harold Becker sitting behind at his desk, and so is the producers. John Peters and Peter Goober were there. And so I'm reading the lines with the casting director. And every time I read a line, she just kind of goes, rolls her eyes, and just kind of almost shakes her head. I just did the lines, walked out of the room, and I asked my casting director, "What's going on?" Did I look ridiculous? And she goes, "No, why?" I said, every time I read a line, she kind of like rolled her eyes and like I look ridiculous. And she goes, "No, she was just trying to throw you off. She's cast that role twice before. She's got a guy from LA. Now she wants to get him cast to make her look good. And so she was just trying to make you look bad in there." And I was like, wow, okay. The game on, let's go to town. And so then after we each read for the producers and the director. Then we went to where they were shooting that day, and there was a mat, and they had lighting, and the crew and the cast all stopped, and they gathered around the mat because Cash Stone still hadn't seen this guy wrestle. And so Cash was there shooting that day, and he had to sign off on this kid, whether he could wrestle or not. So we had our singlets on, we got on the mat, we started wrestling, and then he started calling out, point, like different moves, like duck under, single leg, double leg, everything, arm drag. And then he said, okay, stop. He says, yeah, this kid from LA, he can wrestle. He's a good wrestler. He can fill the role. So we waited about 5-10 minutes, and then John Peters came over and he says, okay, kid, you got the role. And I was like, okay. He said, every time I looked over at you and you just sat there glaring at me, chewing on your cheek, he says, that's what I was looking for. I'm looking for that kind of intensity.
So the rumor that you had to have a wrestle off to get the part against one of the others is actually not complete fabrication. They
Right.
did watch you in a quote unquote shoot wrestling match before they gave you this role as shoot.
Yeah. Yeah. And they had to see whether he could wrestle as well. So it's part of the lore, and it's absolutely, it's absolutely part of what happened for me. Like I said, it was 5 different auditions to get the role. And, what an extraordinary event. It's like, like you said, this is the 40th anniversary. And I just got back from the CIF, California State Championships, and people there are still so engaged with Vision Quest. And even the young kids are now being introduced to Vision Quest.
Is the Tom Cruise story true that Tom Cruise was interested in being involved in the initial Vision Quest movie?
Oh, wow. That's the first time I've heard anything about Tom Cruise being interested in this. There is a connection of Tom Cruise with the director Harold Becker, because Harold Becker directed Taps. And then Taps was, I think, Tom Cruise's first role in a film. And he was an extra in that film, but they needed somebody to do this role, to play this bad guy that was going to shoot everybody with live ammo and go crazy. And they reached out to Tom, like, we want you to do this. And he was like, no, I can't do it. And they said, well, you either do it or you're off the set. And so they kind of forced him into that role, but it ended up being a great role for him, and it kicked his career off. And Harold Becker, the one that directed Vision Quest, was his director. And so there's that connection. But I had not heard anything about Tom Cruise being interested in Vision Quest. And that would be something maybe Matthew would know more about. But as far as I know, nope.
Burger Time wants to know, how do you feel when you hear Lunatic Fringe?
It's pretty obvious. It's like, if you don't feel something when Lunatic Fringe comes on, you better check your pulse, because it's just nothing other than just like, it gets me going. I don't care where I am and how bad a day I'm having. It just stimulates, activates, brings back tons of memories. Of course, it's just a rocking song to get your blood going.
The soundtrack to that movie is pretty good. They got Hot Blooded in there too, and I believe it was the debut of the Crazy for You Madonna song, which was a big deal.
What's so funny about that, and I think people have talked about this, is that when we started, this is interesting, because we started filming Vision Quest, and we shot for 10 weeks. And at that time, Madonna was an unknown quantity. She was just at the beginning of her career, and Harold Becker just picked her out, said she'd be great for this role as the bar singer. And so we shot for 10 weeks. I thought I was done. I went back to school. By the way, for the role, most people know this, but we were 2.5 weeks away from shooting the film, and when I got cast. And I was bodybuilding at the time. I was in a bulking phase. And you know what that's like when you're in a bulking phase. You're just eating everything, and you're eating lots of everything. And I dropped 25 pounds in 2.5 weeks, and we shot for 10 weeks. So I lost that 25 pounds. My character, I was doing what Matthew's character was in the movie. Interesting, as so ironic to me, is that my character was doing that. And then I went back to school. And I thought, hey, we're done. Great. I just gave it everything I had. I actually just like, I was completely depleted after that, but I just went back to bodybuilding, went back to school, went back to classes. And 3 months later, I get a phone call like, oh, we got one more scene to do. And now I'm at 217 pounds. I bulked back up and I'm getting ready for a contest. And they said, like, listen, you've got an entire month to lose this the weight, and we want to shoot this. And I had made a commitment to make this, the best possible character, bring whatever, 110% to the character. And I wanted to make it like, this was what a wrestler looks like. This is how he thinks. This is how he moves. This is what he's going to, mentality is all about. So I wanted to represent the wrestling community the best I possibly could. So I committed. Like, okay, I drop the weight, we shoot, they fly me to LA, we shoot, I come back, I go back to school. I'm back in school, I'm studying, I'm lifting weights. I keep training hard. I'm getting ready for a contest. I get up to 225 pounds and I get a phone call. We got one more scene to do. I'm like, hey, I can't go back down to, I was actually 189 pounds, just so everybody, if you're wondering, I didn't weigh 168, neither did Matthew. But I said, okay, I'll drop 25 pounds again, but I'm going down to 200 pounds. And they
How
were like,
tall are
hey,
you guys, by the way? Just to insert
I'm
for
about
1 second.
I'm about 6 foot. He's about 6'2". He was about 6'2". So he's a little bit taller than I was. And I think eventually between me cutting weight and him building up, because that's what he was doing, he was building up. He had a nutritionist. He was working out, all of that. He quit smoking. He quit drinking. He really committed to the role, which was fantastic. And he learned how to wrestle in a very short amount of time, which is not easy. It's like you don't know what you're doing the first year anyway. But anyway, I again dropped down to 200 pounds. That's the scene where I'm wearing the jean jacket and I talk to him in the bathroom where his nose is bleeding, and I call him a bleeder, and I like to see blood, yada yada yada. But I'm wearing a jean jacket, so it kind of hides what I weighed during that time. So now we were talking, it's been like 9 months altogether, and then they re-edited and they finally released it the following year. And in that period of time, I mean, Madonna's career took off to the point that when they did Vision Quest overseas, they didn't call it Vision Quest. They called it Crazy for You, starring Madonna.
But in that bathroom scene, I think that's maybe your only scene where the female co-star of the movie appears. Did you have much interaction with her?
I had little or no interaction with any of the actors. Or I spoke with Forrest Whitaker a little bit and Gary Casper. They played some different, the different wrestlers in the movie. And I never had a conversation with her. I met her, I think, one time before I did a scene, and she just came like, "Oh, so here's Shoot." Okay, and she shook my hand. She had that bravado. That was her natural kind of like tough girl, New York kind of, kind of a vibe to her. I mean, how sexy was she in Vision Quest? Such like Matthew said, she has all the things I like about a guy and all the things I like about a girl. I mean, it was, and she just nailed the role. So what are you going to do?
Oh, 100%. And of course, there's your famous role with the log. Was that a real log? I know it was really cold that day. How many times did you have to film that scene where you're going up and down the stairs? And if it wasn't a real log, how much did this thing weigh, whatever it was?
Yeah, it was lightened up. I don't know how they did it, but they sealed it up, and it really was really realistic. And it just was a little bit lighter than that size of log would have been. It was a little on just under 100 pounds, which for me wasn't that heavy at that age to climb up and down those stairs. And yes, it was freezing that day. It was one of those fall winter days in Joe Beach Stadium, and every one of the crew was wearing parkas and gloves and stocking hats. And so the sweat you see on my face was actually glycerin because it was just that cold. So as soon as we would do a take, then you'd throw on a parka and wait till they got set up to do the next shot, because they do, like, from Matthew's point of view, then they do it from my point of view, and then they look down on me, and they go back and forth. So they have to keep cutting back and forth to do the scene. But it was a 1 day shoot. It went really quickly, thank God. We got what we needed. The scene has been redone by kids, and Princeton actually did their version of it several years ago as a promotion for their wrestling program. That was done really well. That was probably the best version of that I think I've seen.
And did you have like oil or anything on your arms for that? Because your arms just looked huge. Any secrets to how you got pumped for that?
No, I wasn't pumped at all for that. I didn't
Oh
do
yeah.
like any push-ups. I didn't do anything, man. It was like I actually, my arms are like, what? Like, where did that all go? But I was a bodybuilder, and it was, that's years and years of work in the gym. As you know, my character in the film was a lot like how I trained in the gym, in the weight room. I was in 110%. I didn't care about what anybody else was doing. I was there to get big and to lift and to push myself beyond my limits every time I stepped into the gym. And that's it. If you're really going to be good at anything, you have to look at just improving every day. You make a commitment every time you step in to do some training to do 100%. You don't have to like operate in these super high levels of cardiovascular. I like zone 2 training. I think that you should be doing that 80% of the time, which is it's like around 70 to 80% of your maximum, your heart rate maximum. And that's where you should do most of your training specifically. But again, you still have to make the commitment to show up, to be focused, to have a plan for each day. If you're going to work on technique, be specific. If you're going to work on power moves, work on power moves. You're working on getting out from underneath, work on getting out from underneath. But don't go in there and just kind of flop around. Get after it, have an intention, and take care of your business.
And you do have a toy out now of you with the law. Which is your favorite scene in the movie?
Let's face it. One of the best scenes is with Elmo in the 6 minutes. It's like that scene was priceless, and it meant a lot to a lot of people. It came from a character that was just kind of a side character that was just there, chef cooking, greasy hair, unkept, trying to listen to Matthews, whining about losing weight and women and, all these other issues. And he's just old school, smoking, greasy hair chef, but he came up with this profound insight into life and, what that means and what his personal experience was. And that whole monologue is brilliant, right?